you for joining us today on this wonderful Saturday morning and being a part of this fantastic weekend that we have lined up to celebrate the Bauhaus. We hope that you've got a chance to watch the film, the new Bauhaus, already and enjoy it as much as we have and fallen in love with it. It's a wonderful piece of a film, and we're excited to be able to bring it to the community. And tying with that, of course, we have a Q&A tonight, which is a great opportunity to hear the panelists speak. But to get the weekend started off in a wonderful way, we have this program for you this morning, and we're very excited about it. The Bauhaus is very important to us at the museum, at the Doral Contemporary Art Museum. And if you don't know, my name is Christopher Barake. I am the Deputy Director, and we're thrilled to be able to bring the community all kinds of programs, exhibitions, lectures. And this is really a launch for one of our educational programs. And we're very excited to have this be the first of what we feel is going to be many exciting and informative programs that you're going to enjoy, really for all ages. And to start that, we have a wonderful presenter for you. We're very excited about this. Ms. Dibar, who is an expert specializing in contemporary and modern art. She's a lecturer, and she leads an incredible art education program. It's a journey through art educational programs. It's fantastic. If you haven't watched the lectures, you're in for a treat today. She's bringing all that to us today. And she has experience giving lectures, tours, guiding audiences through museums and galleries, and really cultural programs. And she's bringing that depth of knowledge to this program today. And How to Be Modern, Bauhaus Vision Then and Now, it's going to be a great survey, and I think you're in for a treat. And so with that, I'm going to step out of the way and let our wonderful speaker for the day take over. And Ms. Dibar, thank you so much for being a part of our Bauhaus programming. The Doral Contemporary Art Museum is thrilled to have you and to kick off our Activation Plus educational programs. So with that, take it away, Ms. Dibar.
Thank you, Christopher. I'm very excited. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on the extraordinary Bauhaus, the school, the style, the artists, and the work. We're going to take a look at all that today. My name is Dibar, and I am so happy to be here with you. We are live on Zoom and Facebook Live, and before we begin, I'd like to thank the Doral Contemporary Art Museum and the German consulate in Miami for having me and for presenting this great Bauhaus weekend, and also our partners and all of you for being here supporting the visual arts. We're going to ask all of you to follow us on social media so you can see what we're up to. The museum has a lot of great programming coming up, so be sure to check that out. And we're going to begin with this storytelling approach to the Bauhaus on how to be modern, the Bauhaus vision then and now. Why is it called that? It's because we're going to see the Bauhaus that's already 101 years old, and how it was then and how it is still relevant today, and how we see it in our everyday lives, even in our homes. So we begin with our first slide. And we're going to start with the story of the Expressionist chair. This chair was designed by Brauer, and it was at the beginning of the Bauhaus. So we're going to do a journey of 4 chairs, and we're going to see the history of the Bauhaus. It started at the beginning of the 20th century. The Bauhaus school only lasted 14 years, and the creative power was immense. In 14 years, they created so much, and the legacy continues on until today. So this is 1919, and Marcel Brauer joins the Bauhaus as a student and starts designing. This is the first chair he designs in collaboration with the furniture design workshop where he was at, and the textile workshop. We're going to see more of that later. And this is a primitive chair, and this shows that the Bauhaus in the beginning was interested in the arts and crafts, as in the arts and craft movements that already existed. They were worried that because of the Industrial Revolution, art was going to be sold less and everything was going to be manufactured and industrially made. So in the beginning, they really went back to the fine arts, and their concern was that you could tell the handmade process of the product. So here we see sort of primitivism inspired by African cultures, and just like Picasso did, as you may recall in The Mask and Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, they were going back to the primitive and almost the childlike in humankind. They were tired of the academism in art, and they decided to experiment. Everything was about experiment. They wanted to make everything new and modern, something that no one had ever seen before, and that's what they set out to do. So we have the first primitive sort of chair, and then we have this evolution, heavily influenced by another art movement called Textile, and we see a change towards straight lines and geometrical shapes, and the primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, which is what they focused on, and we will see that. So it evolved to this, looking a lot more modern. And here we make an analogy with Mondrian, who was painting at that time, and this is just for us to see the synergy that was going on between artists, all the creative energy that they were sharing. This is Armchair, 1922, so only a year later. And we already see a strong evolution towards even more contemporary design. We see horizontal and vertical lines. We see that they mix always the opposite, so hard and soft materials. We see the hard materials in the wood and the soft material, the fabric for sitting on. And this was always a collaboration between the different workshops that we will see today. And they were looking to find chairs that were easy, that looked new, and that were easy to mass produce. So this is an evolvement from handmade to mass producing. See, it's not. Next one. Sorry about that. So, and this is the final, this is the next to final chairs. This is the Model B33 chair that many of us are familiar with. Most of us are thinking, oh, I've seen that chair before. And this is when they started working more with steel. And this is like a tubing, and Royer was inspired by a bicycle. And he decided to use that industrial material in the chair. And this is a completely modern outlook because the radicality of it is that it doesn't have the back legs. So it's a flexible chair. It was really groundbreaking at the time. If it looks modern to us today, can you imagine 101 years back? And I'm going to make an analogy to, sorry, this was one that we skipped before. This is a very famous one. You've probably seen it in many buildings and offices. And when you walk in, you say, oh, what a modern chair. Well, it's 101 years old, and almost 100 years old. As we see, 1925. These are pieces that are kept in museums. This one is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And so that was the evolution of the chair, because the chair is usually associated to the Bauhaus movement. And now I'm going to make a quick analogy with IKEA. As you can see, to the left is the Bauhaus building, the emblematic building. And to the right, how IKEA kind of takes that use of lettering and even the typography and the way that they place it on the building. We're going to see some chairs. Bauhaus 1921, IKEA 2020. I know there's a big community from Doral because of the Doral Contemporary Art Museum, and you have an IKEA in Doral. and most of us have visited it. So this is a nice way of comparing it and bringing it to our daily lives. So we, on the left, the Marcel Breuer B32 chair in 1928. This, we can see that there's a certain weaving in the materials, and we have the steel. So it's cane and steel. And to the right, we have two models, two IKEA models, very similar. IKEA incorporated plastic. Bauhaus didn't use plastic at the time. And then we have another chair, the Tobias chair, that has this weaving. So this is the how we are heavily influenced still. It's just one example of these amazing, amazing visionaries and creative artists and architects and of all kinds. This is another example. So we have dining table and 4 chairs of 1930, and we have the version of 2020 that we can easily find and affordably find in IKEA. Affordability and mass production was very important to Bauhaus at this time. All right, one thing that the Bauhaus had that I particularly love is the pedagogy. Marcel Breuer thought of a way of teaching. Here it is in German, and we have the version in English. This is how students learned at the Bauhaus. So you signed up and you had 6 months, half a year of a basic course. And you had to do those 6 months, and then you were admitted or not. Once you were admitted, you would go into the study of materials and tools, nature, color. They were big on color study and optical effects on the eye of the colors. And then you would go into the workshops. This is very important. It's constantly, Bauhaus is all about the division of workshops and then the coming together in the building. Bauhaus means house of building. And that was the most important thing, to build things together and to work as a team, specializing in the different aspects. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble passing the slides, the internet. So Weimar was the first building that the Bauhaus was assigned to. The Bauhaus was an idea of Gropius, but it was a state-funded school. So they depended on the politics of the time and the politicians of the time. They were given an opportunity to take up a fine arts school in Weimar that already existed and make it more modern and kind of bring Gropius's idea. We can see the materials that they like to use, which were glass, panes of glass. This is typical, and a lot of steel. And there was a lot of time spent, for example, on the building of this bridge. Design was very important to them. And the use of new materials, again, that were being used in industry. And also the idea, the notion of design started with the Bauhaus. Actually, that word was not really used that much. It was either fine arts or crafts. And what's this idea of design? Well, it all started with the Bauhaus. And the word design actually started being used in everyday terms as late as 1945 in Germany. So design, everything today for us is design, fashion design, this design, graphic design. But for them, it was a new concept. This was a staircase at the building. And this is another comparison that we are going to make today. This was Gropius's office in Weimar. The building and the design was very important to him. He was very meticulous. The school was very meticulous about where the workshops would be, who would be where, depending on the time of day that they would get in the rooms. This was Gropius's office. So the masters, or the directors, the head of the schools, had separate offices, and this was one of them. And we can see the modernism, of course, of the furniture design, which was big in the Bauhaus. The window, big windows with window panes. Up to then, in the Belle Epoque and end of 19th century, we saw the windows were almost hidden behind curtains, large wooden frames, big ornate gold handles. And they decide to strip that out, strip out all the ornaments, and just have the window with the glass pane. Also, the heating was hidden always, and Gropius likes to bring that into the picture and not hide it anymore. And at a very prominent place, right under the window, and the window is what he wants you to see. So it's like everything is new. Nothing like the old. The old is out. And we are going to see, this was very thought out in regards to the measurements of the human being, ergonometrics. And everything was at the right angle with the right measurements. And we see today, if we go online, we can see that this chair that was in Gropius's office in 1921 is still available today for sale. So it's considered a work of art, isometric design. And we even see it on this particular brand of furniture. If you go online, you see almost the same furniture layout and idea. This was also another design, a very simple design by Gropius's. He designed this simple door handles. Door handles didn't look like this then. And today we look at it in our everyday lives, and Gropius designed it. And it's sold by another brand online still today. This is an article, as I mentioned, last year, the world was celebrating 100 years of the Bauhaus all over Europe, in Germany, in the US, and really all over the world, articles everywhere. And there were special events such as this, like this weekend that we're having at with the Dibar Contemporary Art Museum and the German Consulate in Miami. There were these events all over, and this is one example of an article, Rebel with a Cause, how the founder of Bauhaus changed the world. So that's how relevant it still is today. Literally, this school changed the world. And this was the new Bauhaus building. This is, again, the most emblematic photo of the Bauhaus. It shows the Bauhaus school. It shows the topography. We're going to take a look at that, why that is important. This type of lettering was not used at all. That was very new. Again, the windows, the large panels, and showing the steel, not hiding and no ornamentation. We can see, we can take a look at the materials used, the type of architecture. This was, Gropius was an architect and the son of an architect. And he had this vision for the school when he was in the First World War. He said it was like a flash of lightning, and he said everything has to be taught in a new way, and that was his mission. And really, he was very committed and persistent, and really planned out that mission. And he was constantly raising funds, constantly having meetings with politicians. He was working nonstop. It was amazing, amazing creative force and an amazing visionary. And so he decides to make this building, as I was saying, and they provided the funds for the building. This is, again, the windows that we spoke about, the importance of windows. He said that usually in staircases before you would have stained glass, and it would be very dark, and he decides to change that. They had a system here for opening the windows that was their design, and it was amazing. We see these lamps designed by a woman in the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was very open to women. They made no distinctions, some distinctions that we'll see later. And this was designed by Marianne Brandt, which was a very popular designer, and she actually sold those lamps very well. Again, the furniture, Vasily chair. Bauer designed the chair in honor of Kandinsky, the artist, because Kandinsky mentored him and really liked the prototypes, so he named it after the artist. In Berlin, and then finally, yes, they moved. So as I was saying, they moved from one city. They started in Weimar. Then it was a very traditional town, a very conservative town, and they actually were not happy with having the Bauhaus in their town. So the politicians pulled their support, and they were offered a place in Dessau, another city in Germany, just southwest of Berlin. And then they also had to move later to Berlin for various reasons that we will see now. And in Berlin, we finished with the famous architect Mies van der Rohe, which we had the honor of having working here in the US for so many years. And this is an emblematic building that he made in New York in 1958, completed in 1958. But I want you to see, go back to the building in 1921 and how similar it is. The windows, the materials, they kind of launched the international style in the architecture. Mies also designed this chair, which was a little curvier than the Bauer chair that we've seen before, 1929. Again, all about the chairs. Architects and designers love these chairs. It's like they have to have one of these chairs at their home. They're usually not they're quite expensive actually. And this is what Mies van der Rohe designed, this famous Barcelona chair. It's called the Barcelona chair because it was designed for the World Fair in Barcelona, the pavilion in Barcelona. And this is the actual color that he chose. He chose pigskin leather and steel. And this was the original color. We can now find it online. You see the price it's not very affordable, but it's because of the quality and the leather. Again, the pricing, this is why, because if we go on, we Google it, we search it online, this is what we find. And we can easily, well, if we're willing to pay, we can access these chairs. That the originals are kept, the first prototypes are kept in museums, and we can have a good version of it, manufactured version of it at home. Let's take a look at the women of the Bauhaus. What was original and modern about the Bauhaus is that they made no distinctions. Before that, even in the States, women were not encouraged to study art and even studied in separate buildings or separate classrooms. And there were 50% of the students were women, and they quickly filled up all the workshops. They were kind of steered towards weaving and textiles because there were no men there, and they needed to fill up those spaces, and they needed work to be done. And so they actually, most of them were kind of convinced into going to the weaving workshops, textile. So this is, for example, Annie Albers. Annie is very famous in the US because they came after the war, before the war. So after the Nazi regime closed the Bauhaus, they immigrated to North Carolina, and they had a very fruitful career in the Black Mountain School that had just opened. And they were offered a position in the Black Mountain School in North Carolina as head of director of her husband, Joseph, as director of the school. And they were very, very productive, influenced a great many artists, such as Robert Rauschenberg and Cy Twombly. This is kind of the style of the Bauhaus. They were encouraged to dance, theater was encouraged, play was encouraged, parties were encouraged, because one of the mottos was that play leads you to party, party leads you to work, and then work leads you to play, and then it's a full circle. And actually, the pedagogy was so observant of how children learn, by looking, by observing, and by playing, and how children create. So that was encouraged. And of course, in a town as conservative as Weimar was, to see these people, you know, in 1920, walking around and dancing and going through garbage, looking for materials to experiment on, it was too modern for them, for Weimar. So they moved to the industrial town of Dessau, which we will see. So here is Annie Albert's weaving. And this is at the Black Mountain School here in North Carolina in the US. Joseph Albers had an approach. It wasn't a classroom approach. Everything was experimentation, touching, moving shapes around, observing the materials. So this is an example of how class was led. It was a very unique, very groundbreaking style of teaching. So he's there on the floor, very interactive. Again, out in the sun, women weaving in bathing suits. The next amazing artist is Marianne Brandt. Marianne was probably the most successful artist industry-wise because she patented so many lamps, and they were actually reproduced by the hundreds and thousands and millions by now. She was an exception also. They took her out of the weaving workshop, and she started to, here's the lamp that we saw before, and this is at the MoMA. So she was in the metal workshop, and this is a famous desk lamp. Yeah, and then she was head of the metal workshop department after Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. Here she designs, this is a perfect example of how the Bauhaus stripped themselves out of all ornamentation. Everything had to be as simple, as clean, as minimalist as possible. Actually, they even created Mies van der Rohe with his famous less is more aphorism, paved the way for minimalism. So we can see same time, more or less, these were being manufactured. So it's a 5-piece coffee and tea service of silver and ebony wood. And this is the version by Marianne Brandt. We'll see another picture. So first she designed it with this handle on top, and then she decided to go even more minimal and make this type of handle, because the less amount of product you use, the more economical it was also to manufacture and to make, and the faster you could make it. But then this didn't really work, because when you filled up the water, it really couldn't handle the handle. You couldn't lift it up, lift the weight. So this was more practical, but the design was really, really new and groundbreaking. And I cited it up with this painting by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy because I was actually last November in Madrid, and I saw this at the Thyssen Museum. And when I saw Marianne Brandt, and I kind of related the two, look at how similar they are. Amazingly, the geometric shapes, opposing materials, opposing colors. It was all about opposites and creating a tension between these opposites. So smooth surfaces, no personal references. Remember the first chair that we saw, that everything was about, you had to tell that it was handmade and you can almost read the author of who made it. Now it's all about no personal hand of the artist and clean, smooth, flat surfaces. So the next is Annie Albers once again, and this is an exhibition that was at the Tate Modern in London. This is one of her weaving, the weavers that she used, and this is her and Joseph Albers. I'm going to mention that Joseph Albers was an accomplished artist, and she was a textile artist, and Joseph was a painter and focused on the study of color. He was a great teacher, and then he moved on to Yale University, head of design. So from North Carolina, they moved northeast, and this is a typical of Joseph Albers and his study of colors, of geometric shapes. This in the middle is a study. These are the famous series homage to the square. So all of these are homage to the squares, and they have a different number. So for example, he says, if one says red or the name of a color and there are 50 people listening, it can be expected that there are 50 different types of reds on their minds. So these reds would be very different. And that's what he kind of focused on, the individuality in that sense, and then how to make it visually appealing to all. Another artist, Gertrude Arndt. She started she wanted to become an architect, but curiously, the Bauhaus at first was not an architectural school, even though it was the initial intention. They focused the first years on the workshops. And so she started the weaving workshops and quickly evolved again out of that weaving workshop and into photography. And she would dress up as different characters and take photos of herself. And this reminds us, so she was a precursor of feminist artists, contemporary artists such as Cindy Sherman, which we will see. Sorry for the pixelated image, but these are the famous Cindy Sherman in costume artworks that we can see in museums and in the art fairs that come to Miami and all over the world, really. And so her precursor was a Bauhaus student. Lottie Weiss is another student. These are all the women in the weaving workshop. As you can see, very unconventional, right? 1920s, having a picture taken like that. So carefree. So it was all about having fun and experimenting. Gunther Stolzel. Sorry for the pronunciation. If there's any German people in the audience, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, the Americanized pronunciation. So Gunther was in the textiles, the weaving, and she went on to have her own company. These are some of the amazing tapestries that she made. I don't know if you can observe kind of the texture and even the relief, almost in 3-dimension. Geometric shapes. This almost looks like an urban, like a futuristic vision of the city of New York with high-rise buildings. That wasn't like that at the time. Very interesting. Another weaver, Benita Koschott. Audie Berger. This was a book she made, and it looks like a sample book of all different types of weaving techniques. She was amazing. She had a tragic ending. Unfortunately, all the women went on to successful careers, either with their husbands or having their own companies. She had a tragic ending with the Nazis. She ended up in a concentration camp, tried to go to England, to London, and she didn't know the language. She was hard of hearing, and unfortunately she had to return, and then she faced the untimely death. But how gorgeous are these textiles and how innovative right here. We still see these today and kind of take them for granted, and they were inventing them way back. Let me see the time. Am I good? Let me check the time. Yes. Alma Sidov, she concentrated on furniture design and on children's furniture design, which was, again, very new for the time. Children really didn't have their own furniture. And she made this ingenious wall unit and made it for children's play. So you could actually put your toys away in there, put clothes away, whatever. This was like the children's corner. And then the children could take out these drawers and play in them. She also made the wooden building blocks in different shapes. So the male-dominated wood and sculpture department, she carved her way in there and was truly, truly a singular designer. She focused on primary colors, as most of the artists in the Bauhaus, and she made coloring books, and she tried to make things that were easily reproduced and mass-produced. So I love this photo of the children actually playing and how they could use the building, these drawers in different ways, as seats, as tables, as little boxes to play in, little cars. And here we have a room. We see the wall unit, a crib, everything designed by her. This stair, for me, it's amazing. It's like a little stair for kids, and they can go in there, they can climb up, sit down, use it as in various ways. It has 2 wheels for taking them around. We see more pictures here, and this is really quickly, this is one of my favorite things or most interesting things that the Bauhaus has done. It's the model house that they built for the town wanted to see where their taxes were going and what the Bauhaus was doing. And so they did an event where everyone showed their best work, and they actually made a model house because they said that everyone should have access to a nicely designed house, that it didn't have to be expensive. And most working class people were living in conditions where they didn't have, for example, natural light or proper spacing. And they designed a very economical house that could be mass produced, easily assembled. And they actually did this in real life. There is a documentary. There's so much material online, movies and documentaries we can see. And there's one on this housing project and how they each made them personal. So of course they look repetitive and they look even boring, but at the time it was new, it was modern, and it solved a problem, which was, in the end, you know, it really was useful for the community, so, and for the modern life. And this we see today all over the world, all over the US, these kind of basic houses, very simple houses, and how we each, you know, go set about to personalize them. So again, a children's room, we see this stair that we just saw before, which was new. Children should have their own space. Another artist, Margaret Hyman, she was a ceramicist. She was in ceramics, and actually after the shutdown of the school, the unfortunate shutdown, she went to England and had her own company and was very, very renowned, very famous, called Greta's Pottery. And again, geometrical shapes, the triangle, the circle, primary colors, blue, yellow, we see some greens. And this is her very androgynous look here in the photo. So very, very accomplished artist. This was an illustrator, Lou Shepper. And this is extremely modern. If we look at it, this is almost something that we would see on Instagram, on a post. Again, the lettering was very important in Germany. They used very old type lettering. And they really invented these type of fonts and this new way of using different colors for letters. This was extremely forward thinking and visionary. And she made some children's books that are still popular today, like classical German books. So they went on to have, again, professional careers, and they were very accomplished. So it wasn't just about, oh, the school having fun. It was about creating lasting objects, creating a legacy, and also creating their own careers as women in the beginning of the 20th century, which was also new and modern. So she was a mural painter. Again, these are photos of the women in the school, always like very energetic, vital, having fun, everyone smiling. It was all about community. And this photo on the right is so telling. It's like a picture says 1,000 words. There's so much going on. These straight lines, repetition, geometric lines, people going up, people coming down. So a lot of opposites, some people completely in focus, some out of focus, some still, some moving, all about these contrasting opposites that the Bauhaus professed. All right, now we have seen the women of the Bauhaus. We're going to look at some of the masters. So Gropius, who's here in the right, I'm covering it. He not only he thought of the school, the pedagogy. He made the actual how it was going to be organized. The manifesto. He wrote the manifesto. He printed it out. He gathered the students. He got the place. He got the politicians. He got the funds, and then he had to convince. There was no mediocrity allowed. No one could be mediocre. So he set out to find the best teachers, such as none other than Kandinsky, for example, Clay, and other artists, Mahaly Nagy. In Kandinsky's and Clay's case, they were accomplished artists, and he persuaded them to actually move into the campus and teach there. So that was an amazing feat. Kandinsky is a Russian. He studied law, economics, and he went to France. He was also an accomplished musician. And when he traveled to France, he saw painting by Degas at an exhibition, and he had like an epiphany, and he said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So he went back and signed up in the academy. He studied fine arts, and he became a painter and abandoned his career. Kandinsky was an intellectual. He was a musician and an artist, but he was very into the theory of art. He wrote 2 very important books concerning the spiritual and art, and later on in the Bauhaus years, Point and Line to Plane, which still is in traditional fine art schools, the base book that you have to read. So it's all about point and line, and how a point turns into a line, and how a line turns into a plane and makes a form. So a book entirely about that. Kandinsky was considered the creator of abstract art, and he discovered it one day when he came back, and one of his paintings was upside down, and you couldn't tell what forms. It was non-representational. And he had another epiphany and said, this is exactly what I was trying to accomplish. He was very musical, and he would see colors in musical notes, and musical notes and music would represent colors to him. So this his paintings were very, of course, the compositions are very kind of musical and playful, and even though his colors look random, they were highly, a lot of studies behind each of these paintings. I'm trying to pass on to the next artist. Before we do that, so these are some examples of the first kind of abstract art. Today, abstract art is very common for us. It's very everyday in the art world, but then it was completely new. It had never been done before. Art before was representational, and it told a story, or it was about something in particular. And so he changed that. This is the panel, a commission for panels that are in the MoMA. I had a chance to see them. This is one of the most famous representations by works by Kandinsky, but it's actually a study on colors, again, studying colors. And so he took the circular shape, and he would, you know, these artists would place different colors and see how it spoke to them, how we perceived them. And then I'd like to make, again, put side by side this study by Kandinsky with this. What do you think this is? This is a crib, a baby's crib. Would you put your baby in this crib? I think it would tip over, but it was very skillfully balanced and extremely modern. We have the three basic geometric shapes. We see the triangle, we see a rectangle, not really a square, and the circle. And they were all assigned a color too. So the circle was blue, the triangle was more dynamic in yellow, and the square was red, according to like Bauhaus principles. It wasn't a rule, but that was what was taught. Another painting. So did you see how similar it was in the shapes and studies? I found that interesting. Another master, there, because the professors, the instructors at the Bauhaus schools were called masters, and the students were apprentices, and then they would be journeymen, and they would go on to become masters or assist themselves and work in industry. So the pedagogy and the idea of the school is that artists would go in and then they would leave when they were ready to work in industry or in their own studios. So Paul Klee was from Switzerland, and he was also a musician, an accomplished violinist, and he traveled to Italy, and that was his main inspiration. He studied the great masters, Botticelli, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and when he was in Naples, actually at an aquarium, that's when he realized, as Kandinsky saw a painting by Monet and said, I want to paint. He saw the aquarium, and that's where he got his style from. He was deeply, deeply influenced by the light and color and movement and the world in the aquarium. And in 1920, Gropius invites him to join the Bauhaus. Paul Klee has a unique and individual style. He had like his own world and his own vision. And in this Fish Magic of 1925, in the midst of the Bauhaus years, he produces this this painting, this very famous painting, also showing a moving from figurative to abstract, study in colors, in shapes, kind of childlike painting, going back to primitive shapes, as we can see in this face. And he would scratch off experimentation of techniques. There's a piece of muslin pasted on the painting. There's also a lot of scratching off of material. Another example, the twittering machine, it's a watercolor, and we see experimentation of techniques. We can see here kind of like how he lets the color stain the base, and kind of like this dreamlike quality, and inspired by children's art and how children thought, kind of this playfulness. This is another emblematic painting by Klee, Red Balloon, 1922. And we see the coloring, the geometric shapes, compositional arrangements of squares, rectangles, and primary colors. So Klee was an enormous influence in the Bauhaus and a great teacher. This is Blue Night. He was very inspired by a city in North Africa, Tunisia. And this is in perspective. You see line, again, lines, shapes. We had evolved into the abstract style. This almost looks like a weaving. This is an exhibition that happened in Basel, Switzerland, where he's from, Switzerland. Again, and this is how kind of like all the workshops interacted. And because if we were to look at it and you would say that this is a textile art, maybe it wouldn't surprise us that it is a painting. We have a photographer, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. Laszlo, in this picture, he was really innovating with the perspective, first and foremost. The perspective he chose to picture. We see we're in a ship and we see a person climbing up. We don't know if it's a man or a woman, and that's also very telling of the Bauhaus. We see the contrast in light, dark textures, hard textures, soft textures. In the mast, we see shiny materials, we see opaque. So a very athletic looking person is going up the stairs. We see kind of like how in this photo he created these lines and these geometric shapes, kind of triangles forming and rectangles forming and ovals everywhere in the shadows, in the shapes, and a really interesting play of contrasts and again opposites. It's almost as if you could pull this photograph apart and then kind of put it back together. And Laszlo said something that was, again, he looked into the future. He talked about the new language of the masses. Do you know what that new language of the masses was going to be in the future? And he said this in around 1928, that photo literacy, that we would be looking at photos all the time. And he said, if you didn't know how to read an image, you were going to be the new illiterate. So modern language for the masses is photography, and we have to agree. Today we live in a world of images. We're looking at images all the time and social media. And it started with television, of course, and leading up to our days of looking and scrolling down and looking at one image after the next. So really, these were amazing, amazing kind of tellers of the future. And Laszlo, of course, remember that there's a movie screening this weekend on his tenure here in the US in Chicago. So this is Mies van der Rohe, and the Bauhaus is dead, long live the Bauhaus. That I put that title on this slide because even though the Bauhaus ended in 1933 abruptly, and really because of there was the Gropius resigned at a certain point. He was just so overwhelmed with all the constant meetings, as I said before, and the constant work he had to put in. into the Bauhaus. He was an accomplished architect and had commissions also. So he resigned, and Mayer stepped in, a new head, which was not Miro, another head, and he attracted a lot of communism, and he was accused of having a Marxist kind of ideals within the school, and of course the state wasn't going to support that. There was a lot of the communist revolution in Russia, in China, totalitarianism, and saying, you know, we're all the same, we're all, you know, kind of imposing the communist ideas, and Germany was doing the exact opposite by saying, no, we are unique, we are different, kind of that nationalism, and led to, in this point in time, these extremes in Russia with communism, and Hitler, the rising of Hitler in Germany. So they were very, very against communism, and when they started noticing that there were a lot of communists, according to them, within the school, they started kind of pulling their support. And finally, they fired the new head and tried to convince Gropius. The government tried to convince Gropius to come back, so the founder to come back to Bauhaus, and he didn't want to. He was already thinking of moving. He moved it to England first and then to the US. And he recommended his kind of colleague and competition, a very accomplished architect, Mies van der Rohe. He said, no, hire him. He accepted the position with great, great enthusiasm. And he was kind of like an authoritarian figure in the Bauhaus. He cleaned house. He interviewed each and every single student. And if he considered it like a promising student, he could stay. If he didn't like him, he could not stay. And he actually paid for an abandoned building himself for the school. So he was very into it. Unfortunately, he didn't last long because the Nazis closed the school. They didn't like this kind of avant-garde way of thinking, and they didn't really understand this modernist abstract art, called it degenerate art. That's a different talk, a different story, but that's what happened, and that's how Bauhaus ended. But what happened? All these students and masters and professors, they moved all over the world. So their influence went everywhere. And especially in the US, we had Mies in Chicago, Laszlo Moholy in Chicago also. Then we had Gropius at Harvard, in Connecticut, and the Albers at North Carolina, and then on to Yale, and then in Colorado, there was Bayer, another great Bauhaus artist. In Denver, Colorado, he was hired. So US was very avid of receiving these masters and these people of the Bauhaus, because they were considered the best of the best. So they were greatly, greatly welcomed in the US. Not so much in England, unfortunately, because England was not such a architecturally speaking, they weren't so forward thinking, more traditionalist at the time, but we did have a chance to have them in the US. Let me see what time it is. Are we good? Oh, it's almost time, so we're going to swiftly pass by. Not having great internet reception. And this is actuality today. So again, the Barcelona chair, and this is the Barcelona pavilion that Mies designed. Look at it, how modern is that? How contemporary is that, right? So what's going on today? So this is again, Mies skyscraper designs kind of shaped the entire US and large cities, corporate, educational, and cultural architecture for decades. This Bauhaus style, this minimalist style, this Van der Rohe style, For better or for worse, this was the style in the US for a long time. And also he was a great teacher in the Illinois Institute of Technology, which is the photo on the right. So what would happen today? So this was an exhibition some years back, but how relevant is the Bauhaus today? That many museums constantly have exhibitions, special exhibitions on the Bauhaus. So let's pretend that we're at the MoMA and we see a Bauhaus exhibition. Immediately we recognize the font, right? This kind of lowercase lettering. And this exhibition is called Workshops for Modernity. Really quickly, I invite you to take a look and see everything we have talked about. If you can identify workshops, artists, or works. The first row chair, paintings. We see some posters from the exhibition of 1923. Weaving, what do you see? The furniture design, right? Architecture. So you would know, now you're literate in Bauhaus. You would know that you're looking at Bauhaus work or Bauhaus inspired work, right? You see the lamps, Marianne Brandt's lamps in the background. Kandinsky's paintings, Marianne Brandt's metalwork, tea sets, experimentation of materials. This is how the students, these first 6 months, they related to materials, they studied materials and forms, furniture design. The weaving workshop and the children's design also made dolls. We see a Paul Klee picture in the background. See, I'm sure most of you are identifying some of the works that we saw today. And you would know that you're looking at Bauhaus design. Another museum, the Guggenheim. We left the MoMA, we're going up to the Guggenheim. Another exhibition, Klee and Kandinsky, the Bauhaus years. So this is how, again, relevant and how we are going to constantly see now that we know more about the Bauhaus, a little more, a lot more. This is a new gallery in Fifth Avenue, north of the Guggenheim. And again, Bauhaus expressionism, etc. This is a Breuer, the Met Breuer building. So Breuer built a very emblematic building in New York, Madison Avenue, which now houses part of the works from the Met Museum. This was amazing. This is where the students lived. We saw Gropius's office, and this is where the students lived. Look at how modern that is. Amazing kind of small space design. Lamps. This is modern day articles about, for example, this company, Design Text, a very famous company, for the celebration of the 100 years of the school. They decided to recreate the fabrics made by the Bauhaus students. Again, if you go online and put Bauhaus design or furniture, we get these from cup to lamps to furniture design. And we've reached the end of our talk. Thank you so much for being there. I hope you really enjoyed it. And I always like to end by making this, make the Bauhaus yours. Making it, I want us to kind of think of everything we've seen and answer these questions in the Q&A below. If you find, it says Q&A, if you scroll down on your screen. And if you could answer any of these questions or all of them, put the number 1 next to 2 or 3. So question number 1 is, go ahead and type if you'd like. Which image or object of the Bauhaus looked familiar to you? Were there any images that you had already seen before? Any artworks, any furniture, textiles? If you were a student at the Bauhaus, number 2, which workshop would you choose? Which workshop would you want to be in? The glass textile weaving, carpentry, painting, which was called color. And if you could bring home, number 3, if you could bring home any Bauhaus object, which one would you choose? This is my favorite, shopping time. Which one would you take home? I know what I would take home. I would take home one of the chairs or one of the paintings by Kandinsky. So let me check. We have some answers here. So which image or object did you recognize? Many for sure. Barcelona chair, Margarita answered, I recognize the Barcelona chair. I would be the textile workshop, and I would buy, if I could bring home an item, it would be the Barcelona chair. I agree with you. Ryan answers number 2, I would be in the photography workshop. Evelyn answers probably number 2, which workshop would you be at? She answers textiles with Annie Albers. The honey teddy bear container. Yes, thank you, Evelyn. We didn't mention that, but it is in the movie, the new Bauhaus. Yes, the school that Laszlo Moholy worked at designed such basic things and beautiful objects as the honey teddy bear container. So thank you for that. Let me see any others. Georgia says that she would join the painting workshop. And Brian says he would definitely take home one of the Bauer chairs also. So yes, chairs are very big. And with this we end. If you have any questions, answers, any takeaways that you'd like to share on the chat or the question and answers, please do so. And thank you so much for coming today. Please follow us on social media to check and see what we're up to. And I'll wait and see if I have any new questions. Again, weaving a lot of textile design, and I hope you had a chance to see Sheila Hicks at the Bass Museum in Miami Beach. She's a great textile designer, amazing. That was an amazing show. So for all of you that are responding that you loved the weaving, be sure to check that out online or check out her work. All right. Do we have any questions coming in? I don't know, Daini, if you're there, if you'd like to say something. And if not, this is a wrap. Thank you again for being here. I really enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something new or enjoyed reviewing the amazing, amazing, fantastical Bauhaus School of Design.
Thank you, Sil. You replied all the questions, so thank you. We're gonna disconnect. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. Bye. See you soon.
In just 16 years, Doral has grown into a model city with top-notch quality of life that its residents have helped to achieve through active participation in the community and collaboration with the city's government officials. Nationally and internationally, the city continues to garner positive attention as a flourishing destination with luxury accommodations, world-class parks, diverse gastronomy, and exciting entertainment. There is no doubt that today more and more people are discovering the new Doral, choosing to grow their business, raise their families, and create their memories right here. Doral is the premier place to live, learn, work, and play. Thanks to all of you.
Collection Suites is a private compound of 38 luxury storage suites created by collectors for collectors. Every suite merges a gallery-like space to store your collections with a living space that boasts top-of-the-line technology and finishes. The owner's-only complex is centrally located in Doral, Florida, one of the fastest-growing cities in the country and an attractive playground to investors from all over the world. Collection Suites, luxury storage suites for the true collector.